Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Flipping Junkie podcast. This is a Just Ask episode, so it's something new that we started doing. And if you're a part of the Flip Pilot Facebook group, that's Flip Pilot Facebook group, you can get an invite through flippilot.com to get into that private group that we have, where all these investors are helping each other grow and strive to have a 30,000-foot view of their flipping business, working more on their business than in their business. It's been a great community. It's been growing like crazy. You can go in there and ask questions. And what I'm doing is some podcast episode where I'm answering some questions I get through email and then through that group. And so if you want me to answer something through a podcast, if you just go into that group and then post something and ask, and then use maybe a hashtag Just Ask and tag me, Danny Johnson, in it, and I'll consider having that as a podcast episode. So this one is from Steve, and Steve had asked, how do you not offend a seller? And this is a good question. It's a really good question because my immediate thought of a response for that was that you've got the wrong mindset, really, that if you're worried about offending a seller and you're going into it with the wrong view of things, really, because what it is you should have a genuine desire to help sellers out of their situation. You have a solution to their problem with real estate, and you provide a solution in closing quickly and paying them cash, so if it has a lot of repairs, all that kind of stuff, and helping them out of their situation. And that's the way you should be approaching, with a genuine desire to help the sellers out. And I think when you go into it thinking that, oh, I'm offering this super low amount and they can probably get more, then you're thinking about in this terms of offending sellers. And some people will get offended with a low offer, but it's not all of them, and you can't help everybody. But this got me thinking about acquisitions and going to homes and talking with sellers and trying to work deals out. And it gets into something I'd heard on a podcast recently from Brian Buffini about listening. And what it talked about was basically people do things for two reasons. And one, that you hear that they say the reason for doing something is a logical reason. And then you have the real reason why people choose to do something, and that's the emotional reason, that they typically won't say why they did something. And so, when you go to talk to a seller and you're trying to help them out of their situation, you really have to get to the core of what the problem is, because typically what they're looking for and the reason why they're going to choose to sell to you is not just solely on, getting the most money they can for the property. And I think a lot of people assume that that's what every seller wants, but it's not. It's not, and by any stretch of the imagination. We buy houses from sellers all the time where we offered less than somebody else did, but they chose to go with us. And the reason was we got down to the emotional reason for them deciding, why they would sell and why they were wanting to sell. And I think if you can learn this, it's huge, and it changes the whole dynamic of working with sellers. And like I said, number one is you've got to go into it with the sincere desire to genuinely help people with their problem, with their property. And in doing that, you talk to them and try to get to the core reason of why they're wanting to sell, or what the problem is that they're facing, and then providing a solution for that, so that the emotional decision to sell to you, even though they might say it's a logical thing that they want the most they can get, what they're going to do is choose emotionally how, who to sell to, okay, if you're worried about competition and dealing with other investors trying to buy the same property. And here's a very cool tip. Here's a very helpful way to figure that out, because I think the next question that you are probably thinking of listening to this is, well, how the heck do I get to that? How the heck do I get to the emotional triggers, or what's really gonna sway which way they go on this? And a really good way is to ask them, what are they most concerned about or worried about with this selling of their property? What's on their mind? You have to ask questions, and you have to ask questions that get to the core of that, to understand where they're coming from and where they're at. Because I think all of us go in with these assumptions, and a lot of them are just plain wrong. Like, we're going to think all day long that that's how somebody's feeling or what they're thinking. And that's why I wanted to go into this talk this way, is because that question of how do I not offend a seller is really the misunderstanding of how that whole process should work. And so going in and not having those assumptions, about what somebody's really looking for, wanting out of this deal. And it's not always about the money. It's probably hardly ever about the money. The decision to who they sell to has less to do with that than you think. And along those same lines, when you go into these appointments and there's several people at the property, never assume who the decision maker is. So you might be talking to somebody who says, well, I'm trying to sell this house, and they've got a spouse that's not saying anything. And you're talking and building this rapport, and you've got this connection with the person you're talking to, but the other one sitting there is really the one that's going to make that decision afterwards, and you didn't give them any time. And so just be careful of that as well. But I think that's I think, you know, if you understand that, and you know, if you've got other people doing acquisitions for you, if they understand that, how huge and what a game changer that is to approach those appointments and talking with sellers in that way, can really change things and really get to the point where you're getting more of these deals than you were before, when you're going into it thinking that you've just got to offer more than everybody else. So I hope that helps you guys. And like I said, join the Flip Pilot group. Go to flippilot.com to get your invite. And or if you just find Flip Pilot group on Facebook and request an invite into the group. And then if you have a specific question you'd like to see me answer on this podcast, on the Flipping Junkie podcast, just use hashtag just ask and then tag Danny Johnson in it. And the cool thing is you'll immediately get answers from the group. And then if I do a podcast episode, I'll post that as an answer to it in the comments of that post. So it's a cool thing. Everybody check it out. And be sure to rate and review the podcast. If you're enjoying these episodes and you want to hear more of them, or, you know, whatever, just rate and review the podcast. Just go over to flippingjunkie.com/rate, RATE, flippingjunkie.com/rate. If you're not sure how to do that on iTunes, is where I'd appreciate getting all those. And I like to read all those, and I'll be reading those on the podcast whenever I do the longer interview podcast. But thanks a lot for listening to the Flipping Junkie podcast, and hope you guys have a great day. Talk to you soon.